you. Thank you. This talk we titled, I think, somewhat offhandedly, "Hacking NFC," but it's more about taming NFC. It's more about how do we go from wanting to embed an NFC chip inside a business card to actually having the confidence to ship this as a product to anyone who wants to order it and turn it around in enough time, and it being robust enough so that we have confidence that when it gets there it's going to work. And this is a little bit about that story. It's more about the physical production process rather than the service layer, but it does touch a little bit on the service layer. So who are we? Moo is an online print design company since 2006. Been around in Old Street since, where's Matt? Since Silicon Roundabout sort of genesis. And it's been a strong force in the area, giving a lot of companies shared desk space in the early days, and it has a very strong link into the design creative professionals, where the technical proficiency isn't maybe as high as it is in a development company. So there's a lot of emphasis we put on helpful design and making interfaces pleasant to use for people who aren't steeped in the technology of our world. So as James mentioned, I'm Nick. I'm the technical lead on this project, and there's Kai sitting down there, is the product manager. And I've been involved since October last year in trying to get this product from just a concept and a desire through to a shipping product, and we launched on October 6th, so we've been live for just under 2 months. So briefly, very, very briefly, what is NFC? Inside this is a tiny, tiny chip and an antenna. The readers in your phones and other devices have the same thing. It's a chip, an antenna, slightly smarter chip because it has to do more work, but a power source. And the power source is the thing that you need here on one side of it at least. You form an inductive coupling between the two antennas, and you communicate with the chip on the card via AM, amplitude modulation. And remember that, because that's an important part of our story. And it's at a relatively low frequency as well. So the data rate isn't brilliant, it's slow. So you don't store a lot of data on these things. These cards store about 800 bytes, and we're probably using about 50 of them. If you try and read all 800 bytes, you're there for a good couple of seconds while you slurp it all off, and it's not a quick and easy experience like it is on an Oyster, with an Oyster card. Inside the chip, you can store various different bits of data, sort of like MIME types. There's URLs, there's Wi-Fi details, there's geo coordinates. So when you tap it on the phone will go, oh, that's a URL. Which browser do you want to open it with? Oh, that's some Wi-Fi details. You just want to log onto that Wi-Fi network. That's a lat long. I've got the following mapping apps to read that. And in particular, one of the frustrating things that we found with this technology is that whilst there is a good standards body with the NFC forum creating the behavior for this system and dictating how it works and what you can store, you end up with weird edge cases like you can, in theory, store multiple details, multiple bits of data, but Android doesn't do anything with the ones past the first one. It just doesn't care. So what we ended up doing on our cards is to embed a URL on it. It's like a bit.ly link. It's like a short URL. This being the most flexible thing that you can do with it, since you can change where these URLs point to later on after you've given the cards out. It's the most use we can make of the data on the cards whilst linking it to a service layer in the cloud. So Moo's always wanted to do something around smart cards. They're very, Moo as a company, philosophy-wise, are very keen to push forward where we can. We tried in 2012 to do it. I wasn't around back then, but the chips that we used to put in the cards were very thick metallic etched metal antenna that ended up being crushed in the production process. So this is a picture of one of the original cards. There is all metal foil, I think etched somehow. I'm not sure if it's chemical or laser etched. But what happens when you laminate the card, you ended up cooking and crushing the chip and killing it. And this got all the way through to almost being in production, and we had a lot of PR about it. And then we couldn't launch it because the whole thing got pulled at the last moment.
So we could see the chips.
Yes.
What a good idea, Nick.
That's exactly
There
it.
you go. Just hold it to the light.
Yes.
We didn't want to put anything on there because otherwise it would have spoiled the experience.
Well, here we go. So you can sort of see that. It's a bit washed out. But that is the new chip. So what has changed from 2012 till now is this: printed electronics. So inside the card, if you hold it up, you'll see that little square trace. Now that square trace is silver ink printed, litho printed directly onto the paper, and then a daub of glue, conductive glue, is put on the bits where the antenna, the two ends of the antenna join up, and a little robot arm comes along and picks and places the minute microscopic chip on exactly the right place to make the circuit work. That little blue bit up there is insulation. But this is now bonded straight onto paper, and this means that it's flexible and also pre-produced so that we get it pre-laminated. And it's avoided, it's a lot more robust, and it's avoided all of the problems that we had with the last generation. So here, yeah, you can see what it looks like inside the card. So how did we go from having that as a facility that we can get hold of and have supplied to us into making it a proper thing that you can just go to the website and order at any moment? A lot of it was, a lot of the first 4 or 5 months was material exploration. So this is where you get to know how these chips perform. This is where I was testing out with a NFC reader here, stacking up little foam board things and seeing how far I could get away before it fell away and stopped programming the chip, and using off-the-shelf USB commodity USB readers plugged into. This is a Banana Pi. It's like a Raspberry Pi, but it was slightly more powerful before the Raspberry Pi 2 came out. And just how we could drive multiple NFC devices at one time and have it going over the network. Moo produced business cards 25 at a time on a big sheet like that. And because we needed to mass manufacture these and have it as a process that was quick in the factory, in the warehouse to produce, we needed to utilize the fact that they were on this big sheet of paper to program them to get the efficiency up, really. And on this printed sheet, up in the top left-hand corner, is a barcode that tells you whose order it came from and what they wanted on it when they ordered the card, what URLs that they wanted to point to. So we needed a system that had 25 NFC readers, a barcode scanner, and a simple experience to highlight failures, because failures are a factor in this right now. So the printed electronics works about 95% of the time. On average, any given sheet that we have, there'll be some failures on it because of the reliability isn't quite there yet. So what we ended up doing is we sell you a pack of 20, we actually make 25, and you get a fraction more. Hopefully 25 if you're lucky, but we guarantee a minimum of 20 to account for this failure rate during production. So we went through a number of hardware iterations. This is the hardware that I inherited back from 2012's attempt. And the first thing we did was get rid of all of these USB dongles and replace them with nicer ones. And then we started playing around with the positioning of them. We needed to get much closer to minimize the crosstalk and to make sure that you're talking to the right chip. So this was all prototyped in foam board and just getting out a scalpel and cutting things, and a lot of material work. And it eventually turned into this, which was our custom acrylic, laser cut acrylic case. And it looks lovely on the outside, and when you open it up, it's a crazy mess of USB cables. And these are USB 3 hubs. They're stupidly over-spec'd, but USB 3 has a much better power supply, amount of power that it can supply to the devices. And when these are running, these all draw about 1/4 of an amp each. So it can be quite power hungry when it's all running. And the last thing that we did was that we, because of our failure rates and because it's happening in a factory, you need a really quick and obvious way to highlight which cards haven't quite worked. So, because the card is quite thick, you can't really shine light through it unless you have some very, very, very powerful LEDs, but we didn't really want to go down that route. And you don't really want to have a screen off to the side to look at, because then you have to correlate between a grid of things over there and this, and you can make some transcription errors. So we used projection mapping. We ended up hooking up a projector, just an off-the-shelf Pico projector, plugged it into the Banana Pi, set up a little bit of calibration and geometry, and we now shine light onto the ones that don't work. So we flash a white light to indicate where it hasn't worked, and then when the person's in the warehouse operating this, they put little stickers on the ones that haven't worked, and we just prune them out later when we've cut them up. And this is it in the factory. So this is we ended up making a little custom tripod to keep it out of the way, but that's it installed and now working. And this is in the US and the UK, and we've made a bunch of these machines, and we can just scale them as quickly as we want whenever, if demand, but we had no idea how popular this product would be, and the machines that you get that do all of this automatically are 6 figures or more. They're incredibly expensive. So we wanted to start off modestly. This whole thing costs about £2,000 to produce, and we can just literally take the memory card out of the Banana Pi, clone it, build up another one, put it in, and bring it up, and then it works. So everything about it is driven from, the identity is driven from the MAC address in the Banana Pi, so it scales really well. But there were problems. So one of the issues that we had during development was I was corrupting tags. I would literally kill tags to the point where you tap them on the phone, they wouldn't work, they'd be dead. Somehow, I mean, this shouldn't really happen. Because of the way that error correction happens in the transmission, you shouldn't really ever botch a chip up that badly, but somehow we were. And more annoyingly, it was one of those that was hidden, so this was just a random shot of my debugging, but that's me running 39,000 loops of tests to try and iron out when it was working. Weird things happened, like it seemed to get better when everyone left in the evening. In the office, and I was like, oh, is it Wi-Fi corruption? Is it, goodness knows what it was. I mean, had no idea. So we ended up taking it to a friend of mine who runs has a lab in Cambridge, has lots and lots of very expensive equipment. Like this costs, something like 10 grand. The oscilloscope, it's pretty pricey stuff. And we gave ourselves a day to try and hone in on what the hell was going on, because otherwise, if we couldn't use this commodity hardware, we'd have to build something custom. And it was a horrible nightmare. However, we found out what was wrong. So this is a still from the scope trace of the communication between the chip, the two sides of the connection. Now remember when I said it was amplitude modulation earlier? This is meant to be AM. That line, that top line, is meant to be flat apart from these little blips, these. This whole waviness you see there is corruption. This is because the space-constrained design of the circuit board, the tiny stick, there isn't enough of a smoothing capacitor in there to keep 5 volts at 5 volts. So when you start drawing power, the voltage drops. And these little spikes, especially this bit here, if you're trying to differentiate low from high, and the whole thing's sort of waving up and down, then you don't get a solid block of communication. And whilst we were up there, this is a sketch of what was going on. We have our USB hub, we have our dongle, and we have, frankly, a crappy USB cable that didn't have enough copper in it. So literally, because they'd skimped on and cost optimized this cable to make more of them, the internal resistance of the cable when we were drawing the current down was so high that it was dropping the voltage to such an extent that it would kill our tags. So the solution was to solder a whacking great high-speed electrolytic on every single one of our ESP devices. It's ugly, but it works, and we haven't had a problem since. And also, the other thing you can do is buy better cabling, but we wanted to make doubly sure. So there's a lot of soldering I had to do to make this thing to make this thing work. So that was just one of the problems we had. There were a few. So bringing it together. Let's see if this works. This is it in action. So this is Josh, one of the guys that helped me out with it. That's him scanning the barcode in the top left, and you can see the lights flashing down, and green circles mean it's good, and white flashing ones mean it's bad. So they go, flip that, and then, oh yeah, the contrast isn't brilliant here, but there are flashing cards there to show that those two are bad in that particular sheet, and you move on and do the next one. So this is the process in the factory. It's fairly monotonous, but it's easy for someone to do. So you put the card on there, scan it, you put stickers where it flashes, you move on to the next one. So training was lovely. It was super minimal for getting people up to speed who had never done this before in the factory. There are lots of people working down in the warehouse, the factory, to produce MOOs, various bits and pieces. This is the most complicated thing that we've tried to do so far. None of MOO's print products have had anywhere near this level of customization before. So, just sort of in summary, what we built. It's Banana Pi. Doesn't matter what it is really. I'm to use a Banana Pi because it was slightly more powerful than the Raspberry Pi at the time. It was driving 25 threads to drive each NFC dongle needed a bit more grunt than we can get out of the first generation Pi. Python is the thing that binds it all together. So you've got the barcode scanner, the projector, and the 25 devices. There is a lovely Python library called NFC Pi to drive the devices in a really lovely high-level way, and it takes care of all of the data formatting for you. Pygame turns out to be the thing that is best suited to drive an output for the projector because it's got a nice run loop, and you can make circles and objects fairly easily. And just reading the barcode scanner, it's a keyboard device, so you just hoover up the data as you would for anything else, really. So just a quick thing about the launch. This was us just putting together promo packs to send out. So each of these cards demoed doing something different. So we had links to YouTube, I think charities, a bunch of different things that demonstrated the kinds of interactions that you could have with this, the actions that. On the service side, when you configure these cards, we say that you give each card an action to perform when you tap it. And one of the things is go to the URL. The other thing is run an IFT recipe. So in one of the sort of prototypes we put together in the studio, you could tap a card on the back of your phone and turn a Hue light bulb off and on, just as a sort of silly thing, but it's to get you thinking that the idea behind these cards isn't that necessarily they just make your phone do something. They can have an action performed in the world as part of the server interaction, the invisible side of that transaction. So we launched October 6th. We've done thousands of orders so far, which has been brilliant. The manufacturing process has been really solid. I've been really pleased with how well this has worked in the flesh. Very few glitches, and those glitches that we do have, I said that we've handled them in band here. It means that where we had one instance where someone had scanned a sheet backwards, so all of the customer data that was on one side of the sheet got accidentally programmed on the other side, and the middle row of cards was fine. But because this is all in the database, we flipped it back around by reassociating all the links in database rows, and we didn't have to sort of scrap their order and bring it all back. It just worked as far as the customers are concerned. So it kind of means that if you can do those kind of things, if you can have an Apollo type situation where you can't go and issue a product recall, you have to fix this remotely. If your architecture allows you to do that, it's a really good thing. Just a quick thing about our plans for 2016. There's a developer API coming so that you can program these cards. You can change what these cards do remotely by knowing what the short URL is that is embedded on the card. There are more actions coming that we're fleshing out what this thing does, the number of things that shrink-wrapped sort of services that these cards can do on your behalf. And there's a companion Android app that we are working on that will enable you to mess around with the cards directly. One of the limitations we have is that the designs, we only allow, because of the failure rate, we only allow you to have 5 designs, and you have 5 of each card printed, and then they're allowed to fail in the factory, and you get shipped at least 20 cards. but we don't know which designs particularly they are. So we only allow you to customize per visual design on the card on the website at the moment, not down to an individual card level. But with the Android app, when you are in front of the card itself and you can say this card, you can then customize it. So there's we're working towards full customization of every image on every card, but that's a way off until the success rates of the printed electronics goes up to near 100%. Then we're holding off on offering that as a facility on the website. And we are limiting the number of unique designs you can have on them. So that's it. That's a very whirlwind tour through it. Thank you very much.